Today is part 4 of the technical training in bird sound recording using a phone and adapted parabola. I think by now most people know me, but I'm Hilary McBean, part of Planet Birdsong. We are a small organisation working in a collaboration with the Centre of Excellence in Biodiversity at the University of Rwanda. And my fellow trustees are Peter Cowdrey, who is a recordist, composer and musician and the main promoter of this technique, and Isaac Herman, who is a bioacoustician, educational technologist and game designer, and has had a very major part in the technical aspects of the recording and programming. So without further ado, my background is actually in urban planning. I'm a member of the Royal Town Planning Institute, and I spent 30 years in practice concentrating on development management, but very much at the fore in that was bringing my interest in conservation to ensure sustainable development in everything I did. So today we're going to cover validation, and by now I hope some have already tried recording and might have some files already on their phone waiting to be processed. So we're going to cover their validation, and that is the checking of the identity of the bird species for your target bird and any other species that might have been recorded. Then we'll move on to submission of the data and where you send it. And then we'll move on to cataloging and storage and where this data goes, and what a reminder of what the overall objectives of collecting this data actually are. So first of all, I want to talk about what you submit for validation. And the first thing to ensure is that your file is correctly labeled. Now, we've covered labeling in part 2 in some depth, but I'm just going to do a short reminder here. The labeling of the file covers the full file name, as I've already described in part 2. And that is the name on the recorded and processed data file. So you've done a little bit of light processing to clip the file to the appropriate length of about 30 seconds, and you have taken out any gross noise, but this is done very lightly. The filtration of the file is extremely light to ensure that you don't use anything of the original natural recording of the bird. You may have made a voice recording at the end of your audio file, and you will now provide a document file, a written file, which is a transcript of what you said in your voice recording. This is to make it more usable and easier to follow for any users, scientists who come to this recording later and want to know the context of the recording and the metadata around your sample. So that is done in writing as a transcript, and you can supply it as a simple document file. And then if you have a photograph available of either the species, target species, or the habitat in which you found the bird, both of those are very useful, but not vital, but very useful indeed, particularly if the bird has not been identified, or if it's anything unusual, or might be a bird in an unusual context, in an unusual place. Now, just going back to the written transcript of your recorded voice at the end of the file, you'll remember in part 2 we talked about what goes into this voice recording, and eBird invites this type of recording. If you go through the eBird links, you will find they talk about this voice recording as very useful metadata. This is metadata being data that describes the main piece of data. So this is additional information which is extremely useful for science. So eBird provides space in their submission form for comments, and this is where you would put the written transcript of your voice recording to give that information in eBird, and the same information can be logged in the Rwanda Biological Information System. So, as I described in part 2, all the items, all the things you need to cover in your file name and your voice recording are all the things which eBird asks for to support the sound file, so that any users understand what that is about. If you cover what eBird requires, then you're also covering what RBIS requires, and indeed iNaturalist if the data is forwarded to that organization at a later stage. But for the moment, we're dealing with eBird and RBIS. So at this point of validation, this is the point when all identification queries should be resolved. So this is why it's essential that your sample with these items attached goes to the validator. And that person is an expert in Rwandan birds. Gail van der Vee has very kindly agreed to do this. He's the chief validator, and he's very kindly offered to check these files and confirm the identification of the bird as far as he can. If indeed he is unable to confirm the identification, then it could go forward as with a question mark on the file name, as I've already described to you, or indeed it might go forward as unidentified, and at some later stage that identification can be added to the data sample. It will be for the validator to decide what name to put in at this stage, or whether to mark it as unidentified, and also to confirm the scientific name. You can have a go at that from the guidebooks and put in the scientific name you believe it to be, but again, that will be validated and checked by the chief validator, Gail van der Vee, or anyone else he appoints to do that same task. So just a reminder of file names. At this stage, your file names should look like this. This is detailed in part 2, slide 10. But just as a reminder, your file name will have its date and time as automatically generated by RecForge 2. You will have added in the position, which is a GPS plot. You can generate either from a GPS unit, or you can generate that from your phone using Google Maps, and that is covered in part 2, I believe. I think it's part 2, and just exactly how you go about getting that position. By the same method, you can get your elevation. In this case, I was only at 170 meters above sea level. Obviously in Rwanda, you're likely to have a 4-figure sum there, or you will have a 4-figure sum there. Here's the place. This is a very local name in Scotland. You choose local names so that the purpose of that is to give any users of this data the best chance of finding this location again. So local names which are identifiable to people around and as local as possible. There's the fully spelt out name of the sample, the target bird. It was singing, so you put in song, otherwise you would put in call. Moving to the end here, the sample was 20 meters from the recordist, and we also have on this recording the Eurasian curlew. So that goes in at the end, and that's supportive data. And this is a WAV file, an uncompressed file. So that's all spelled out in the blue. And then we have another example here. Obviously the date, the time, the position as a GPS plot, 1,000 meters above sea level. It is at a farm. Farm names are very useful because they are quite well known, they're well established, and they're very localized. So Brockhurst, it was a chaffinch, British bird, and in this case there were two present. That was visible, so that's gone in as well, ×2. And if you're dealing with recording of a bird within a flock, I suggest you put at this point flock, F-L-O-C-K, to show that there's a large number of birds, or you can put in something like ++. That's a useful recognize way of showing that there were multiple birds present. So you would say chaffinch ++, meaning many. Again, a song 25 meters away from the recordist, and also in the recording we have a wren and blackbird also audible in the WAV file. So that's the format for labeling your audio file. But we haven't actually covered all the essential information, as you can probably see. And this is where your voice recording at the end of the file is very useful. So just a reminder, you will see from the eBird link about recording in RecForge 2. They recommend a voice recording, and what you do is stop your recording of the target bird, wait 1 or 2 seconds, so you literally stop it and start it again, and then you record your own voice speaking about your example, your site, your target. And here are the items that you might put in. It's at your discretion. You can put in whatever is likely to be useful to future scientists using this information, but these are the things that are likely to be useful. So, and are things that are actually listed in the eBird data set. So they repeat the name, and there's the scientific name once validated. Gender is very useful, if you can clearly see the gender of the bird. If it's a singing bird, it's likely obviously to be male, but that isn't true of every single bird species, so take care. The nearest place name, as I've just described, just confirm that. Now, habitat. Where is this bird? What sort of habitat is it in? What kind of forest? What kind of swampland? What kind of farmland? Is it traditional small plots, mixed habitat with stands of trees, or is it more open fields in a more modern farm? And you're also, some of you will be very familiar with different types of forest at different elevations, and you can put that in as well. In this case, I was in Oakwood, which is a typical British habitat, and the bird was actually foraging, feeding in the oak trees. Now, there's another useful thing. Juveniles are present. If they're young juveniles, that does suggest that they've bred in the area. If they're older juveniles, in a resident flock, again, that suggests they've bred in the area. But if it's a single juvenile bird, which is quite well developed, it could have moved from another area. It could have flown 1,000 kilometers to be in this position. So it doesn't prove breeding in that particular location. So you have to make a judgment about that. You might find that the bird is, your target bird is visiting a nest. So clearly breeding is occurring, and that should be recorded in this metadata. You might find eggshells you can associate with this particular bird. You need to be careful, it belongs to the target bird. Any signs of breeding is very useful. If you see 2 birds in courtship, a male and a female, obviously a very good sign that they might move on to breeding, so that should be recorded. Next, the weather. This has this is useful to know because it is an indication to the validator of how much visibility you had when you attempt to see this bird. Once you've recorded it, remember soil, S-O-I-L, sound first, record it, and then try and identify it by observing it. Now, if you're in a misty place and can't see very well, that can come out in this data on the weather. If it's quite dark because of the time of day or cloud cover, that will also be obvious. But if you can say that there's no cloud cover, it's sunny, it's calm, then your visibility is likely to be very good. And that helps the validator know that you had a clear view of the bird. So that's all very useful. Method, eBird do ask for the method of recording. And in this case, I was using the parabola with the phone at 48 kilohertz mono. And that is technical data you can take off RecForge 2 along with your system. You might not be using a parabola at this stage. That's fine, no problem. You simply put phone and then the level of kilohertz, which is a level of sound intensity, if you like, and mono. We record on mono in the phone. You put in your own name as a recordist. That goes into eBird. You might have somebody with you, a colleague. They might be the one who take the picture and actually make the observations to help identify the bird. So their name goes in here. And then the verifier, which is likely to be Gail van der Vee or one of his colleagues. So that is a typical set of metadata which you transcribe into an ordinary Word document to go along with your submissions for validation. So validation and submission. It's absolutely vital to do this, even for common birds, because we want this data set to be of scientific quality, where it's highly credible, so that people using it can be very confident that the very best has been done to ensure that the identity of this bird is accurate. And so, and also eBird want to receive data of scientific quality. And this makes the data most useful. So this process is really essential. So here is Gail's contact, his email address and his phone number for WhatsApp. Please just use it with discretion. Of course, he may appoint others to help with this, and we would post details of those names later. So that is the email address to which you send your submissions. So what does that consist of? So you've got your main audio sound file, lightly processed, as I've already described, fully labeled, as I've already described. You've got your voice transcript written out in a ordinary Word document, which you can attach to the email, and a photograph of the bird itself, if possible, but if you can't do it, doesn't matter. And also, if you're not sure of the identification of the bird, it's very useful to know, have a picture of the habitat it's in, because this helps with the validation if the identification is not known. So you send essentially these potentially 4 items: the audio file, and attached to that would be your voice recording, and then your your Word document with the transcript of your voice in it, and then your photograph. All those items in an email to Gail or anybody appointed by him. Gail is very busy and is often in the field, actually, so you might not hear from him straight away. It's quite useful to send him a WhatsApp message to say that you have submitted data to his email address, and we are going to meet with Gail and others involved with the data side of things to establish a protocol, and hopefully at this point you will receive some kind of confirmation email back from Gail, and then he'll get back to you with the validation as soon as he can. Once the file is validated, the file will be finalized, the correct species name and scientific name will be slotted into the file label. And if that can't be done because Gail is not certain either, then the name will be added with a question mark, or it'll go as unidentified. But for sure, that data is valuable and it will go forward. So this then goes for cataloguing and storage. We'll give details of exactly the procedure for this, but I expect you to manage submission of your data. We don't want to land Gail with a lot of administration of files. So you will submit your data to eBird in the manner which I showed you last week in part 3. There is a particular link in the eBird links which show you how to submit data using a phone. That was raised in a question, and it's quite well covered in the link in part 3. It also gets sent to the Rwanda Biological Information System, RBIS, at the University of Rwanda. And there is their email address here. That's a central email address. So again, so that they know what this is about, you need to WhatsApp the data managers. And we have Mapenda Minji, and that's his email, his WhatsApp number. He's the data manager, or Deborah Zuzo, who is the project manager for the RBIS, just to inform both him and her that the sound file has been emailed to the main Centre of Excellence email address, and they can ensure that it's extracted and uploaded into the RBIS system. So just a little bit about these depositories and catalogues. They are all global commons and will be available both to scientists, and in the case of eBird and iNaturalist, they are available globally to people with an interest in bird sound, including potentially visiting bird watchers. And this is particularly true in eBird, which is why we're very keen on eBird, because there is a Rwanda pack, which means that anybody visiting Rwanda can go into eBird and extract all the records in eBird which have been submitted from a Rwandan location. It's based on locations. So any record submitted from a Rwandan location is in the Rwandan pack. And over time, eBird intend to curate this so that the best samples are put into the pack. And you can help with that by submitting your examples and grading them, as I described last week. And in part 3, there is a link showing you how to grade your own sample, and this helps them ensure the quality of the Rwanda pack. iNaturalist, now I know that the Centre of Excellence is quite keen on iNaturalist because it covers all taxa, just as the centre does. So it's a useful collection point for all biodiversity records. But the benefit of eBird is that it specialises in birding and has the Rwanda pack included in it. And it is becoming the go-to place for world birding research and international birders. Both of these organisations, eBird and iNaturalists, are run from the US. eBird is run by Cornell University and Corley Institute, and iNaturalist is run by the California Academy of Natural Science and in conjunction with the National Geographic. So they're two very well respected global commons data sets, but they are run by different organisations with slightly different objectives. But for birding data at a global level, eBird is becoming well established. The Rwanda Biological Information System is essential for this project because it's run by the Centre of Excellence, and the objective is to build up tax data on all taxa found in Rwanda, both animal and plant systems. And the bird data we are collecting will go into this system and will then be available as guaranteed Rwanda sourced data for Rwandan science, which if you're using it to check the biodiversity of an area, you must use locally sourced data. Otherwise, it doesn't really have any meaning. So the RBIS is an essential component of the depositories for this data. So moving on. So I just wanted to go over the importance of accurate bird sound data and the multiple purposes it serves. This was covered in the introduction to this training series in the recording from the Centre of Excellence seminar series on October the 20th, and is shared with you on the Google group. If you are not part of the Google group, then please forward your email address and phone number to me and others. I will give those details shortly, and all this information can be shared with you. So all your contributions are really essential for Rwandan science, knowledge and education, and they'll be greatly appreciated because, as I said at the beginning, although many of the species on the Rwandan list have been recorded, they have been recorded elsewhere outside the country, often at great distance. And we know that these bird sounds differ over those distances. And the birds actually within the Rwandan region, particularly Albertine Rift, haven't been under-recorded, and those locations are not necessarily well documented. So to be useful for science, we need to build up that Rwandan data set. And this is the task we are developing as a citizen science project. And one of the key reasons for doing the citizen science and in the collaboration with the Centre of Excellence is because that brings in a larger number of people from all sorts of local communities. And this data and this practice and people going out birding and collecting bird sound is very visible to local communities, and those communities can take direct part in this, and those involved with data collection, the citizen science, can pass on this love for nature that they develop through doing these things, and local communities start to appreciate the nature around them and the well-being they obtain from this biodiversity that is part of their environment. And as such, when it comes to modifying their practices and their way of life and their system of operating in agriculture, they appreciate to a much greater extent why those suggestions to a more sustainable way of operating are relevant to their lifestyle and to becoming more productive and, frankly, improving their local economy. So that can only be done if they appreciate the nature around them and the values that it brings to their well-being and way of life. So the citizen science is as much about doing the project as having the data available. It's very much about bringing nature, bringing a love for nature to communities. And then once we have this data, it is carried forward into much more formalized education projects. I have described the computer app that we have developed, and this can be taken into schools, and children or students can play this. It's very much a fun app to help them in bird identification and sound identification. So it's very much in line, and our collaboration with the university is very much in line with the many parts of the master plan for Rwanda. And so it was this need for the data and this well-developed master plan and the well-developed science in Rwanda that brought us to Rwanda to establish this project. Because I have to say that it is pioneering work. You are very much working with us on a pioneering project. This hasn't been done anywhere else. And so we're very keen that you engage with this and build up your skills and competencies and perhaps become a bioacoustician who can really bring some useful skills to the science within Rwanda. So that's largely spelt out on this slide, but it's also covered in the introduction presentation we did on the 20th of October and is shared with you in the Google group. It's also available on the Centre of Excellence website and through, the link is available through the Centre of Excellence Rwanda Twitter feed and also on our own website, Facebook and Twitter feeds. So what I've done is try to draw all those sources into one list of places. So we have our websites, respective websites, our Facebook pages, our own Planet Birdsong website and Facebook is just being developed along with our Twitter feed, but we'll try and ensure all these useful links are within them. Our main contact point for participants for questions and answers and information, and I hope this will be an ongoing thing as people get out there and try things out, is the WhatsApp group Planet Birdsong Project. So please, if you're keen on this, join us and you can see how things develop. The admins for that WhatsApp group are there, some of them, they're not all there, there are some more, but these you will be able to find one of these people amongst your contacts, I'm sure. The Google group, to get into that, this is the name of the Google group, Planet Birdsong Training Participants. And this is the place where we share all these slides, which I've recently presented, the introduction and parts 1 to 4, are all shared in the Google group, and you access that via Google Drive, a very useful system. And then direct contacts for any information on this whole project. You can come to me at, this is my email address. You will also find me in the Planet Birdsong project. You can WhatsApp me in there, and you can do a direct WhatsApp if you would like to. And another direct contact is our project manager at the Centre of Excellence, who is Nzibaza, who would be pleased to help as well. Another thing I'm planning to do is perhaps prepare a gazetteer of all the links to the presentations, the slides, and the recordings of the presentations, and perhaps in that too the links to the eBird training resources, because they are vital part of this training. They explain the process of recording rather better than I can, and so I'm going to try and prepare a gazetteer of all these things in one place so that you can easily find them. So that's our project, and I very much hope that as many people as possible will join us and start to build up their skills and competencies in recording birdsong in Rwanda. So thank you very much for listening to this presentation and for joining us, and we look forward to a collaboration moving forward. And I also look forward to getting to Rwanda in June 2022, and where we can do some practical training, and I can see who is starting to build their skills and move this forward, and hopefully by demonstrating that to our potential funders, we will be able to help with equipment and resources to carry this forward. So that's actually really useful to know, that to gain this funding and gain support, we need to demonstrate that this is a viable and active project meeting our objectives and meeting Rwandan objectives. So by participating now, you actually actively help us gain those funds. So it's important to start now. We're not waiting until we have funds to buy equipment. We want to get started on phones now. And we've chosen the system of using phones because most people have access to a phone, increasing numbers of people have access to a phone, and that is your key recording device. So we look forward to your participation and continued participation. So Murakoze Chane and goodbye.